Table Mountain dominates the Cape Peninsula, and the Bankfin Touring Car Championship is back in Cape Town for rounds 5 and 6 of the series at the Killarney circuit. A huge crowd at Killarney with driver parades, autograph sessions and the Bankfin grid girls all adding colour to the festive mood at round 5 and 6 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship. Beneath the glitz and glamour is the serious world of championship motor racing, with reigning champion Janelle de Villiers and BP Nissan teammate Duncan Foss taking up where they left off last season to take the early lead in this year's championship. De Villiers went to Cape Town with a healthy lead, with Foss under a little pressure from former champions Terry Moss and Sean van der Linde. Table Mountain was blanketed in cloud and it was cool and overcast on Friday as the first qualifying session got underway, with a good grid position a must on the tight Killarney layout. Out in the spare engine Audi was Eastern Cape driver Mark Johnson, with the privateer brigade bolstered this year by British driver Mark Peters, who will campaign in South Africa for the entire season in the Duxbury Modems BMW. Peters is vastly experienced in British and European motor racing, but was having his first look at the picturesque Killarney circuit. Going into the Killarney event, the British driver was also defending a narrow 4-point lead at the top of the Privateers Championship. Right behind Peters in the Privateers Championship was Johannesburg student Marco de Santos in the Midas Duckins Nissan Sentra, who's been a thorn in the factory flesh in the Bankfin series and once again was the fastest qualifier among the privateers. Among the big guns, former champion Mike Briggs was not that confident about his chances during qualifying.
Yeah, unfortunately, these cars are just so sophisticated nowadays. We've gone on a setup that I'm not happy with. I've got a good setup for the race. We've certainly got something that'll take me through the race, 15 laps, and it'll be competitive all the way. But unfortunately, I don't have something that's quick in qualifying, and we really had to go into qualifying with a setup that I didn't know, and just not working for me at the moment. But I'm confident that from a race point of view, I should be pretty good.
BMW have not won at Killarney since the 1993 season, with 1994 champion Sean van der Linde responding by posting the third fastest time in the first qualifying session. Less than a second separated the first 5 cars, and it was once again the BP Nissan Primera pair of champion Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss who again topped the leaderboard. De Villiers hails from Paarl, just down the N2 highway from Killarney, and grabbed the 12th pole position of his career, with the first 3 in qualifying all picking up weight penalties for round 5.
Janelle picks up 60 kilograms, I pick up 45, so that makes a big difference. We've tested both with the weight and without the weight, and it's worth probably half a second, so I'm sure the other cars are going to be a lot closer to us this race, but hopefully we can still qualify in the front row.
The field for round 5 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship weave their way down the back straight on their warm-up lap, and we take a quick look at the grid. Nothing new up front with the Nissans 1 and 2. Row 2, van der Linde BMW and Aberdeen Audi. Row 3, Privateer de Santos Nissan Sentra and former champion Moss Audi. On the 4th row, 2-time champion Briggs BMW and Cowie in the Toyota Corolla, with Arnold Geertz standing by to describe race action.
Thanks, Tinky, and Killarney has been notorious down the years for touring car first corner mishaps. The green light with Hilton Cowie storming up on the outside of the 2-engine Audis with a clean start so far. Race cam action now from the Briggs BMW, and there was plenty of bumping and boring. Ahead of Briggs, there was contact between Foss and van der Linde, with De Santos and Cowie also swapping paint. Then came a big bang, and Briggs found himself spinning off the circuit after being hit by Cowie, with the Killarney Hoodoo striking yet again. There was a cloud of dust across the circuit and more drama at Quarry Corner, with George Besagno clipped by the Johnson Audi and spinning off the circuit himself. Everyone was long gone when Mike Briggs got a sick-sounding Sasol BMW mobile again, with Cowie's Minolta Toyota Corolla stranded in the middle of the circuit. It was no surprise when clerk of the course Steve Harding brought out the red flag to call a halt to proceedings, while marshals removed the stricken Minolta Toyota from the circuit. Replay action of the first corner incident, this time from the Moss engine Audi. Moss is tucked in behind Briggs as the pack exits Conti Corner with heavy contact between De Santos and Cowie. The left rear wheel on the Cowie car is flapping around as he is pushed up onto the curbing, and discretion is the better part of valor as Moss wisely takes to the dirt on the inside of the circuit. The restart, and everyone was back on the grid with the exception of the unfortunate Cowie. On the run into Conti Corner, it was all very orderly, with the cars lying astern behind the BP Nissan Primeras of Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss. Race cam action from the Foss car, with Aberdeen and Briggs giving each other room. That sort of discipline from drivers should have happened first time round, with Aberdeen and Briggs still avoiding contact with each other at Quarry Corner. Briggs was a little too gentlemanly there, and as he went wide, Marco de Santos nipped in front of the Sassel BMW, with Terry Moss also challenging. Early race order saw de Villiers ahead of Van der Linde and Foss. Next up was Aberdeen, with Moss, Briggs and de Santos almost side by side through Shell Corner. Now race cam action from the Aberdeen Audi, and on the entrance on the fast Sabat sweep, contact with Duncan Foss, who spins on into the outfield. Can you believe it? There you're going, minding your own business in the touring car section, and from third to stone last in one easy move. And Duncan Foss now had a huge amount of work ahead of him. Foss was getting back onto the circuit, while de Villiers and Van der Linde were through the Bank Vodacom corner, followed by the engine Audi pair of Aberdeen and Moss, de Santos, who locked up the brakes, and Michael Briggs in the second Sassel BMW. Race cam action from the Briggs car as they headed for the kink that leads onto the pit straight. Race leader de Villiers and Van der Linde had opened up a slight gap, with a tremendous three-way tussle developing between the two engine Audis and the Midas Duckham's Nissan Sentra of privateer Marco de Santos, who for a season and a bit has been a pain in the backside where the works teams are concerned. Cam action from the Midas Duckham Sentra as de Santos chased after Moss. A terrific turn of speed from the Nissan took de Santos inside Moss as they hit the braking area for Quarry Corner, and there was nothing the former champion could do as de Santos moved into fourth place behind de Villiers, Van der Linde and Aberdeen. There were problems for Moss, with Mike Briggs in the second Sassel Beamer now climbing all over the back of the engine Audi. De Villiers and Van der Linde had a handy cushion, but behind them, the battle for the minor placings was developing into a free-for-all. Sabat sweep and onto the tree line back straight. Race cam action from the Briggs BMW, with these cars building up to speeds of around 220 k's an hour. Ahead of Briggs were Aberdeen, de Santos and Moss, with the Nissan Sentra again showing tremendous straight line speed to draw alongside Aberdeen on the approach to Vodacom Corner. Aberdeen had the inside line and de Santos locked up the brakes in a big way as he was forced to take the long route around the slightly banked corner. Moss and Briggs were tucked in behind the Nissan Sentra, and at the front of the field, Sean van der Linde wasn't letting Janelle de Villiers get away from him. Behind this struggle for third, another good battle was developing amongst a batch of privateers, with Mark Peters ahead of Mark Johnson, George Besaidnout and Nico van Rensburg, with Sandra Nair and Brian Martin fighting it out at the tail of the field. Lap 5, and no change amongst the first four, with de Villiers leading Van der Linde, Aberdeen and de Santos. Behind the quartet, Terry Moss looked to have missed a gear or had made a slight mistake at Conti Corner, and Mike Briggs brought the Sassel BMW alongside the engine Audi and moved ahead at Quarry Corner. Moss was a little ragged through Quarry but was fighting back, and this little battle between two tough former touring car champions was a cameo to keep an eye on. A significant gap had suddenly opened up between race leader de Villiers and Van der Linde. Aberdeen and de Santos had closed slightly on Van der Linde, and Briggs led Moss with an ominous puff of smoke trailing from the BMW. Van der Linde was also in trouble, and first Aberdeen and then de Santos zipped past the ailing Sassel BMW. Race order was now de Villiers, Aberdeen and de Santos, and from the engine note, it was clear that Van der Linde had run into a problem of some kind. Confirmation of that came as Van der Linde brought the Sassel BMW into the pits. Race order, de Villiers, Aberdeen, de Santos, Moss and Briggs, Peters, Johnson, Besaidnout and Van Rensburg, with the second Sassel BMW driven by Sean van der Linde in the pits, and the Cape Town bogey rearing its ugly head once again for the BMW squad. Lap 9 out of 15, with a terrific battle going on amongst the privateers in the middle of the field. Mark Peters led Mark Johnson and George Besaidnout, with Nico van Rensburg right in there too. The quartet were closing in on an ailing Mike Briggs in the second Sassel BMW when Johnson got just a little carried away at Vodacom Corner. The ex-Aberdeen engine Audi disappeared off the circuit in a cloud of dust, and 2 seasons ago, Audi four-wheel drive would have come in useful for Johnson. While Briggs had brought the second Sassel BMW into the pits, Peters and Besaidnout had been caught by Duncan Foss, who was charging his way through the field after his early race coming together with Chris Aberdeen. Caught up in the heat of their own battle, Peters and Besaidnout weren't about to make it easy for Foss to get past, which was probably just a little naughty of the pair. Both factory BMWs were now race casualties, and Cape Town is certainly not a happy hunting ground for the Midrand-based team. Back on the circuit, Duncan Foss unceremoniously went past George Besaidnout at Quarry Corner, and now had Mark Peters in the Duxbury Modems BMW in his sights. The Duxbury Modem's car was the only BMW left in the race, and it was only a matter of where Voss chose to go past the British driver. Eventually, the decisive move came at the Sabat sweep, with Voss moving into 5th place when he muscled his way just past Peters. Race order was now de Villiers, Aberdeen, De Santos, Moss and Voss, but there were problems for Peters. With the British driver having to back off slightly when Voss made his move, the Duxbury car lost a little momentum, and George Besaidnout grabbed his chance to go past Peters down the back straight. Besaidnout was now 6th, with 6 privateers running in the top 10. A great day for the privateers. Lap 13, with Janil de Villiers still in control of proceedings, but action was looming behind him with privateer Marco de Santos and the Midas Duckham's Nissan Sentra closing in on the factory engine Audi driven by local man Chris Aberdeen. Young de Santos has always hankered after putting a privateer car on the podium in a Bankfin touring car race. He had a podium place in the bag here, but 2nd place is always better than 3rd, and Aberdeen was coming under severe pressure from the young Johannesburg Charger. Further back, the pressure was still on where 3 other privateers were concerned, with George Besaidnout now having to fend off Mark Peters and Nico van Rensburg in what had been a thoroughly entertaining race-long duel. Race leader Janil de Villiers had a 2-second cushion over the Aberdeen-De Santos battle, and all Aberdeen could see in his mirrors was a Nissan Sentra, and a big one. Race distance was running out, with de Villiers moving inexorably towards a win that would put him 3rd behind Mike Briggs and Sean van der Linde on the list of drivers with the most South African touring car victories. However, on the other hand, the only statistic Aberdeen was worried about was staying ahead of Marco de Santos, and charging down the pit straight, the Nissan Sentra was hauling in the engine Audi, with Aberdeen trying to force de Santos wide. Well, it all backfired badly when Aberdeen suddenly started to lose the Audi and Conti, and onto the dirt he went. Aberdeen did well to recover, but a costly mistake saw de Santos into 2nd place for an unlikely Nissan 1-2. An unlikely 1-2, and that one would have expected it to come from de Villiers and Voss, but this was a tremendous performance by de Santos, who quickly put breathing space between himself and the Audi, rather wisely. Unless de Santos came up with a little brain fade of his own, Aberdeen now had little chance of catching the Nissan Sentra and must have been cursing himself. The battle of the 3 privateers was still in full swing, with George Besaidnout, Mark Peters and Nico van Rensburg tied together with a piece of string, a short one. This was tremendous stuff, with the 3 drivers enjoying themselves hugely. Peters was trying to force Besaidnout into a mistake, with van Rensburg waiting to pounce. This was the closest battle on the racetrack, and one that was set for a grandstand finish. Ahead of them, another little confrontation was starting to develop, with Duncan Voss in the 2nd BP Nissan Primera slowly closing in on 4th place Terry Moss's engine Audi. Voss had gradually worked his way through the field and now had Moss firmly in his sights. The 3 privateers lined astern down the back straight and into the braking area at Vodacom. All it needed to settle this scrap was one momentary lapse in concentration, with Peters desperately needing to get in front of Besaidnout to stay ahead of Marco de Santos in the Privateer Championship. Only 6 points separated Terry Moss and Duncan Voss in the overall championship, so this little scrap was important to both drivers, with Voss edging closer and closer to the Audi, with Moss having to resort to driving defensively. Privateer battle, and George Besaidnout was also having to defend for all he was worth, with Mark Peters making a do-or-die attempt to get past the Nissan Sentra at Conti Corner. Through Sabat sweep and onto the back straight, with Duncan Voss now less than a car length behind Terry Moss, and you could take poison on the fact that Voss was going to attack the Audi under-braking at Vodacom. Moss and Voss sounds like a vaudeville act, but there was nothing funny about this battle between 2 hard men, with Moss holding the inside line, and now it was a drag race to the flag.
The flag was already out for Janil de Villiers, Marco de Santos and Chris Aberdeen, with Voss pipping Moss to the line by 0.05 of a second to take 4th place. George Besaidnout also won his little duel with Mark Peters and Nico van Rensburg, but it was Marco de Santos who was very much the man of the moment.
Me and Chris had a really good dice. I was trying to pass him everywhere. I was going around the outside, around the inside. It was a really clean race. I got around the outside of holes, I think it is, of Chris, and he outbroke himself a little bit. He went a bit wide, and I got him coming out on the exit. And then I got a nice gap, and I finished, I think, about a second behind Janil, so it was an excellent race for us.
A terrific result for the BP Nissan team, and the engine Audi team will be satisfied with their 3rd place. A rather cloudy and windy Ferris Cape at the Shell Helix race day at Killarney, and a quick look at the qualifying session on Friday for round 6 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship. George Passaignot is a stalwart of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship and set the third fastest time amongst the privateers in the Nissan Engine Exchange Centre. Second fastest time went to the British driver Mark Peters in the Duxbury Modens BMW, who will be campaigning in South Africa for the rest of the year. Both Passaignot and Peters were in impressive form, but once again it was a Johannesburg student, Marco dos Santos, in the Midas Duckham's Nissan Sentra, who was the quickest of the privately entered cars. NGN Audi Works driver Chris Aberdeen was really going for it on his flying lap, but a mistake at Vodacom corner cost him fractions of a second, and he posted the fourth fastest time. For all that, Aberdeen was better off than teammate Terry Moss, who did not post a time when a side shaft broke as he left the pits, and by the time Moss got back into the car, the checkered flag came out to end the session. Sasol BMW driver and 1994 touring car champion Sean van der Linde posted the third quickest time to share the second row of the grid with Aberdeen. But once again, it was the BP Nissan pair of Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss who dominated, with the reigning Bankfin champion de Villiers scoring the 13th pole position of his career. Another BP Nissan 1-2 on the front row of the grid. Row 2, the van der Linde BMW and Aberdeen in the Audi. Row 3, privateer Marco dos Santos in the Nissan Sentra and former champion Briggs in the BMW. And in row 4, Hilton Cowie in the Toyota, missing from the grid after the crash in round 5. It's over to Arnie Geertz again with round 6 action.
Thanks, Dinky, and we were going to have another of those touring car first corner disasters at Killarney. There was a disaster, all right, but this time it had nothing to do with over-enthusiastic drivers crashing into each other. As the field came into the pit straight for the rolling start, the ex-Aberdeen NGN Audi driven by Mark Johnson blew its engine in a big way, with a huge cloud of smoke spewing from the back of the car. More of that later as we pick up race cam action from the dos Santos Nissan Sentra, and this time none of the bumping and boring that created a problem in round 5. It was all rather very orderly as the BP Nissans of Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss led the pack into Quarry Corner, but behind them the Johnson car was still blowing out clouds of smoke and dropping oil all over the circuit. Johnson's inexperience, he really should have left the circuit already, was going to cost the rest of the field heavily second time round. Into Shoal Corner with Duncan Foss leading Janelle de Villiers. Race cam action from the Foss car and high drama as de Villiers tapped his teammate up the backside. That's Foss spinning off the circuit in almost the same place he went off after clashing with Chris Aberdeen in round 5. Mark Johnson, on the other hand, had finally parked an NGN Audi now bereft of all its oil with the race stopped because of the oil slick from the start line through to NGN Corner. And young Mr. Johnson wasn't going to win any Killarney popularity contests or awards. Now, replay action of the Foss de Villiers incident from the race cam in the Marco dos Santos car. A huge wake-up call for the young Johannesburg driver as the BP Nissan Primera spun broadside in front of him. And with the red flags up, marshals were about to repair their huge oil spill with a lengthy delay, the end result. Lap 2 after the restart, and probably the only person at Killarney happy over the oil spill was Duncan Foss. When the race was stopped, it meant Foss could restart alongside de Villiers on the front row of the grid, and he quickly slotted into third place behind Janelle de Villiers and Sean van der Linde. The cars were throwing up clouds of cement thrown down to soak up the oil, and track conditions down the pit straight through Conti Corner and on the straight leading to Quarry Corner needed to be treated with the utmost caution. Marco dos Santos almost got caught out at Quarry, and Chris Aberdeen and Mike Briggs closed right up on the Midas Duckham's Nissan Sentra, with Aberdeen slipping through at Shoal Corner. Race cam action from the dos Santos car. The Midas Duckham's Nissan was now on 5th, and that quickly became 6th when Mike Briggs seeped through on the inside at the entrance to the Save-At sweep. Dos Santos had dropped 2 places, and up ahead Duncan Foss was putting Sean van der Linde under severe pressure. The BP Nissan Primera was up alongside the Sasol Beamer down the back straight, with van der Linde having to fend off Foss through Vodacom Corner. Order was de Villiers, van der Linde, Foss, Aberdeen, Briggs and dos Santos, with the cars almost invisible through the clouds of cement dust on the pit straight. Riding with dos Santos on the charge to Conti Corner illustrated the problems facing the drivers. The engine note let you know that they were tippy-toeing through Conti with a little wobble from the Briggs Sasol BMW in 5th place. Up at NGN Corner, Foss had managed to get ahead of Sean van der Linde with the 2 factory BP Nissan Primeras of reigning champion and current championship leader Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss, now 1st and 2nd. When Briggs and dos Santos arrived at Quarry, dust on the exit of the corner caught out Briggs, who had a big moment that allowed dos Santos to nip ahead of the Sasol Beamer. Dos Santos was now up to 4th place and chasing after Chris Aberdeen in the NGN Audi. fifth place for De Santos became fourth place when Sean van der Linde suddenly pulled over with a mechanical problem. Now race order was De Villiers, Vos, Aberdeen, De Santos and Briggs, who had Terry Moss right on his tail in the second engine Audi. With van der Linde coasting along and obviously heading for the pits, teammate Briggs had to defend the inside line at Vodacom corner, with the two works BP Nissan Primera starting to edge away from Aberdeen, who was coming under a little pressure from De Santos again. Briggs in turn had his hands full trying to hold off the Moss Audi. BP Nissan pair of De Villiers and Vos may have been edging away, but there wasn't much to choose between Aberdeen, De Santos, Briggs and Moss. More race cam action now from the De Santos car. That's Aberdeen chancing his arm with some late braking at Conti corner. This is where Aberdeen made a hash of matters in round 5 to hand second place to De Santos, but he got it right this time. Things went all right for Sean van der Linde, who was out of the Sassel BMW, and his work was over for the day. Lap 6 with De Villiers and Vos in control of matters in the BP Nissan Primeras, with the gap between the pair and Aberdeen ever increasing. Aberdeen was still being chased by Marco De Santos, who had his eye on yet another podium finish. After his second place in round 5, the young Johannesburg driver was on a roll, and again proving to be a thorn in the flesh of the factory drivers. There was a potential problem for De Santos, who now had Terry Moss on the second engine Audi closing in on him. Mike Briggs had disappeared with the BMW Taylor Row at Killarney continuing, and the team must be wondering what they have to do to win at the Cape Circuit. Vodacom corner, with De Santos sandwiched between the two engine Audis, with Moss starting to slide the car around in spectacular fashion. Second Sassel BMW driven by Mike Briggs was slowly heading for the pits, with a two-time champion yet to win since joining the BMW team at the beginning of the 1997 season. While Briggs forlornly made his way to the pits, hostilities continued between Aberdeen, De Santos and Moss, who were now tied together. Through Conti corner and on the run up to Engen, De Santos was doing everything he could to let Aberdeen know he was right behind him. Not that Aberdeen needed reminding, and he must have been sick and tired of the sight of De Santos in his mirrors. Battle was still going to have one big turn or two waiting. Back in the pits, Mike Briggs joined Sean van der Linde as a spectator for the rest of the day, while Aberdeen, De Santos and Moss continued to keep the near-record crowd thoroughly entertained. Persistent pressure finally paid off for De Santos, and he might have caught Aberdeen a little unawares when he chose the ultra-fast Saybat suite to make his move. Nissan now had 3 cars in the first 3 places, but De Santos still had plenty of work to do. Aberdeen also had his problems, and apart from trying to win back third from De Santos, he had a fired up Moss on the attack all over the back of him. Sometimes youth can get you. De Santos almost overdid matters under braking for Vodacom, and the ever-aggressive Moss was letting it all hang out, and it was a hugely entertaining race. Behind the trio, the 3 privateers were at it again, and once more the George Besaidnout, Mark Peters and Nico van Rensburg sideshow was providing for some marvellous racing and more exciting entertainment. Besaidnout had a slight cushion over Peters, who was under enormous pressure from Nico van Rensburg in the Hillbank Nissan Sentra. Lap 12 out of 15, and now it was the 2 BP Nissan Primeras of Neil De Villiers and Duncan Vos who were tied together with a piece of string. Round 5 saw De Villiers move ahead of former BMW driver Dion Hubert on the list of most career wins in South African touring car racing history. With 15 wins to his name, another victory would see De Villiers draw level with Sean van der Linde, but it looked as though Duncan Vos had other ideas. Behind the 2 Nissan Primeros, De Santos and the Midas Duckham Centre had opened up a slight gap over the 2 engine Audis, but there was drama at the front of the field, with De Villiers and Vos charging towards Conti corners side by side. It was desperate down stuff as Vos went around the outside, with De Villiers putting a wheel up on the curbing. The 2 cars touched, and team manager Glenn Moore must have been having palpitations. All he needed was for the pair to take each other out, but after some heart-stopping moments, he still had his 1-2 at the front of the field, but now it was Vos who was ahead of De Villiers. The crowd got their full money's worth and a little bit more this time. With Marco De Santos third and gradually easing away from the engine Audis of Chris Aberdeen and Terry Moss, the Nissan Cup was overflowing. There was no way either Aberdeen or Moss had thrown in the towel, but barring mechanical problems or an accident brought on by brain fade, the Audis weren't going to catch De Santos. The other question being asked at this stage was whether Nissan team orders would be brought into play, with Vos told to make way for De Villiers. That added a little late interest to proceedings, with the Aberdeen-Moss battle also keeping everyone on their toes. With a second podium place booked in his name, Marco De Santos looked to have backed off slightly, but Terry Moss was having a full go at Chris Aberdeen. Yes, Yes, you can tell. No team orders here, and through Vodacom, Moss once again had the engine Audi all out of shape. It was terrific stuff, but with early evening gloom descending on Killarney, Nissan put the finishing touches to what for them was a mighty successful day at the races.
A Nissan clean sweep of the first 3 places, with the 2 engine Audis next up. 2 more Nissans in the hands of privateers George Bezuidenhout and Nico van Rensburg were in the top 7, and you can't get better than that in the Bankfin Touring Car Championship. Happiness on an all-Nissan podium, and it delighted Duncan Foss.
Yeah, there was a lot of oil on the track, so the track was very narrow, and it was just like a single lane, and you were desperate not to be on the oil because you would just slide off the track, so I didn't want to go near the oil.
Do you think that Mr. Hall is going to have something to say to you later on?
Probably.
Nissan domination of the Bankfin series is reflected in the Drivers' Championship, with Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Foss top of the pile, with privateer Marco de Santos now in 5th place behind engine Audi driver Chris Aberdeen. Nissan also walked away with the Manufacturers' Prize and have a huge lead over Audi in the Manufacturers' Championship. The gap is 105 points, with BMW another 40 points behind. No wonder Nissan team manager Glyn Hall was a happy man at the end of the day.
No, it went really well for us today. 1, 2, 3 in the second race, first and second in the first race. Better than that we couldn't have really expected. And Marco de Santos in the centre really showed incredible performance with his second place in the first race, and then now to overtake the 2 Audis. Brilliant drive from Marco.